Council meeting for Thursday, April the 23rd, and all members are present except Councillor Fonseca, Councillor Unica, Councillor McFadden's on vacation, Councillor Miles, Councillor Parrish, Councillor Sato on a personal matter, and Councillor Starr on a personal matter, and Councillor Tovey and Councillor Miles. Well, good morning. I would like to welcome the members of Regional Council and staff to this special council meeting that is promising to be informative, engaging, and that will challenge our thinking as we embark on the renewal of our strategic plan. A quality strategic plan is essential for any organization, especially a large municipality which affects the everyday lives of so many people. It provides us with clear direction for where we want to go as a community and how Regional Council will guide and direct regional staff to get us there. It will also help to facilitate clarity of purpose, focus, and a clear path for our future. It will include measurable outcomes that we will establish with the input from the community and will be monitored and reported regularly. In the end, the plan we develop will be enabled by a technology solution already purchased and being set up and implemented that will provide us with detailed reports integrating the regional budget allocations and projections clearly aligned to our vision. This information will be readily available and enable us to make informed and effective decisions to support the community. Today marks the beginning of this process. I encourage all of you to approach today with an open mind. Staff will be sharing valuable insights gleaned from quality data analysis to shape the discussion for the day. And from there, we will embark on a journey to envision the future of Peel into 2035. And with that, I'll turn it over to David Swark, our CAO, who will lead the proceedings for the day. David, just before you do, I just want to move approval of the agenda. Councillor Grove, seconded by Councillor Downey, that the agenda for April the 23rd, 2015 Special Regional Council meeting be approved. All in favour? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really excited to begin today's discussion with Council on the strategic planning process that we're going to undertake to create Council's vision for the future of the region of Peel. What we are going to embark on today is really a new community-informed 20-year vision that will be reflected in the strategic plan of the region of Peel. And this plan will guide the work of Regional Council and regional staff over the next 20 years to respond to the changing needs of the community. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start that process and give us an opportunity first to identify the issues that we face in Peel. We will bring elements of the feedback we received to Regional Council, so we'll get you to identify the main issues today. We will take them out and to the community, and we'll bring them back over the next few months to Council as this process matures and we collect intelligence from the community. And I'll go into some details of that in a few minutes. But I do warn you, we have a full agenda planned for today. We'll start the morning with a series of presentations on where we are today with in terms of demographics, economy, health status, and federal and provincial environment. That will then be followed with a discussion on the key issues that we should be considering in our planning. The issues identified will form the basis for discussion in the facilitated workshops that will start this morning and go into this afternoon. And each issue will be discussed in greater detail in those workshops. The morning session, this session we're in right now, is really about the what is, the current trends and the realities we face as a regional government today. This afternoon session is really about what if, and thinking about the future vision for the community that we want to see in 2035. So I'll just give you a few objectives for today. One is we will provide you with a high-level overview of the strategic planning process and community engagement process to date. This was presented in the January 22nd and March 26th Regional Council meetings and endorsed accordingly. You will be determining this morning, as I said, an initial set of key issues facing Peel, which will be further validated with the community. We have The themes and discussions that we will be going through today will be graphically depicted by an artist. It's already started. The artist is Tanya Gerber. Tanya is a graphic recorder and graphic facilitator. She supports groups in visioning and planning such that innovation, creativity, and synergy emerge. And the graphics that we produce today will be used throughout our planning process and hopefully will end up as part of the final strategic plan. I'll just touch on some of the major milestones of the work. January the 22nd, we reported to Council on the planning process and heard back from Council that they wanted some type of community engagement, meaningful engagement in this process. So March the 26th, we reported back to Council on the proposed community engagement strategy that was approved by Council. Included in that, I'll get to that in a minute. On the 23rd of April, which today, and June the 18th, we will have meetings with Council to get Council's input in the plan as it's being developed. And on September the 17th, we aim to have the final report before Council. We have implemented a variety of tactics to ensure that the community is well informed of the strategic planning process and understand the services offered by the region. As the Chair mentioned, we'll be using an online tool as an additional method this time to understand the needs and issues of our residents. We're creating a community e-panel, and it will be leveraged for immediate involvement and use throughout the ongoing engagement, ongoing engagement with the community throughout the term of Council. We are also going out and meeting members of the Council, of the community in various opportunities, such as meetings with ratepayers groups and so on with councillors over this period as well. So to summarize, after the presentations that are going to be made now, I will turn to regional council members to identify key issues. And the hope is that we won't get into a long discussion this morning about the issues, but just identify what's important to you. Single words, small phrases. Those will then form the basis for your in-depth discussion in the workshops this afternoon. At the end of the day, we will return here, have a plenary discussion to summarize the insights from the day. So without any further ado, I'm going to suggest that we move ahead with the presentations before we begin our discussions. Okay?
Thank you.
So I'll invite Ron Jarvis, Manager in Peel Data Center, to discuss demographics in Peel.
Welcome, Ron.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of Regional Council, staff, and guests. I've been asked this morning to provide some demographic context for Peel Region, where we've come from, where we're going in the future, and also to present some of the implications of those demographic changes to our region as a whole. There are two messages that I want to leave with Council before I get started. One is the demographic characteristics I'm going to talk about can be looked at from many different lenses. And I want you to keep your personal lenses because each of these demographics will have some areas of resonation within your own perspectives. So whether it's health or economics or environment, I want you to think about how these demographic trends impact those implications. The second message that I want to leave with you before I get started is that a number of the slides, I talk about Peel as a village of 100. And the reason I do that is for illustration purposes only. If the trends continue as they have in the past 10 years into the future for the next 20 years, these are the things that would happen just based on trends alone. I don't want you to think that I came up with some mathematical formula or model that I plugged numbers into and generated what 2035 is going to look like. I didn't. I simply moved trends along and said, this is what would happen if nothing changed. So let's get started. Oops. Okay. So what you see on the screen is what's happened to Peel over the past 40 years. It's important to know that Peel has had a very historic, rapid growth rate. Over 1 million people have been added to the region. You can see the road networks that have been added, the residential employment growth that's been occurring throughout the region. The average annual growth rate over this 40 years has been 27,000 people per year. That equates to about 77 new people coming to Peel each and every day. This rapid growth has significantly altered the landscape of Peel towards being a more dense urban fabric. But in addition, Peel has preserved its urban, suburban, rural, agricultural, and natural landscape. The fully connected, interconnected transportation network that you see on the screen, as well as Pearson International Airport, and available water and infrastructure to support growth will continue to be important drivers for growth for the future. As growth proceeds, the urban areas of Brampton and Mississauga will become fully built out, resulting in pressures to intensify and redevelop areas, while also experiencing development pressures and opportunities for Caledon to grow. The challenge for Peel will be how to finance and service future growth in a fiscally sustainable way, balancing growth within existing urbanized areas where we know the cost of servicing is less, while at the same time providing opportunities for new growth in new urbanized areas. The future of Peel's landscape will be influenced by the decisions that are made and how we manage the pressures for growth. So let's take a look at the future. We can see that all three municipalities will be experiencing some dimension of future growth. The financial risks associated with that growth will be influenced by the geography of where that growth occurs. This slide depicts, in an illustrative way, 15 distinct areas of future new development, including both intensification as well as greenfield forms of development. These 15 areas are currently in the process of being serviced or will have to be serviced in the future in order for development to proceed. What we know is that development, which is closer to the lake, is less costly to service from a water and wastewater perspective. We also know that intensification generally costs less to service than greenfield development. The decisions about where future growth occurs and how to finance that growth will be critical from a financial sustainability perspective. We also know that if current land absorption trends continue, we'll require 9,000 hectares of additional greenfield lands to accommodate growth to 2035. This is an important slide because it shows that Peel's population will continue to grow. After significant pressure from the region as well as the local municipalities, in 2012, the province revisited their growth plan forecasts for the region. When the original growth plan came out in 2006, we knew that the numbers were wrong for Peel. The assumptions that had gone into the calculation of the provincial forecasts had not accounted for PPU increases. They had accounted for PPU decreases. So the illustration that you see in front of you provides an opportunity for Peel to grow to 2 million people and 1 million jobs by 2041. That's like creating a city of about 600,000 people or a new city of Brampton being added to the region by 2041. We do know that the process we're working on will allocate growth to all three municipalities. Caledon is exploring various options that will bring its population from 60,000 people to approximately 146,000 by 2041. These options would be mostly in the form of greenfield development. However, there's a great opportunity here to create complete communities in Caledon. Brampton and Mississauga are also planning significant growth that will bring their populations to around 900,000 by the 2041 planning horizon. In Mississauga, the vast majority of that will be in the form of intensification, while in Brampton it will be a combination of intensified greenfield communities and intensification. Again, an incredible opportunity to create a livable region in the future. So let's take a look at employment. Since the formation of the region, more than 500 jobs have been created in Peel. However, we know that Peel has also, over that period of time, gone through 5 recessions. The C.D. Howe Institute has told us that the last 3 recessions have been the worst since the Depression. Each recession seems to be getting worse. These recessions, however, are not solely responsible for the employment situation that you're seeing on the screen. Between 2007 and 2011, we know that 19,000 manufacturing jobs were lost in Peel. Manufacturing jobs were lost and replaced by service, retail, warehouse, and logistics employers, which generate far fewer jobs. According to provincial forecasts, Places to Grow 2006 document, the province had forecasted 730,000 jobs in Peel by 2011. What we know from the National Household Survey is that there were only 649,000 jobs in Peel in 2011. That's a gap of 80,000 jobs. Investments in infrastructure are being based on incorrect projections, over investments that need to be recovered by DCs if and when this development occurs. In order to achieve the 2041 P2G Amendment 2 forecasts for employment, Peel will have to create an environment that will generate more than 300,000 new jobs. This slide takes a look at jobs from a different perspective. It shows us that historically the ratio of people to jobs has been 2 to 1, so 1 job for every 2 people. However, during the 2007 to 2011 period, that ratio dropped for 1 job for every 4 people. This trend is a key factor in explaining the gap between what's happening on the ground and what the province has forecasted for Peel's employment growth. Provincial forecasts continue to be based on 1 job for every 2 people, while what's actually happening on the ground is different. Looking out into the future, the province continues to assume a ratio of 1 job for every 2 people. If the trend occurring on the ground continues at the rate of 1 job for every 4 people, the gap between what is actually happening and what's forecasted will continue to grow wider. The growth plan employment forecasts have significantly overestimated job numbers as it's failed to account for recessionary periods and economic structural changes. Let's turn our attention to the seniors population. The aging phenomena is not just a Peel-specific phenomena, but it's a global, national, provincial trend that will change the face of the region. Over the last 15 years, all 3 groups, as you see on the screen, have been steadily increasing, but the significant growth in the seniors population will take place between now and 2041, with those aged 65 and over outnumbering those 0 to 14 for the first time in and around the year 2024. In 2011, seniors comprised 10.5% of Peel's population. In 2041, this figure is expected to rise to 21.1%. This group will more than double as a proportion of total population, whereas the 75 plus will almost increase by 3-fold, from 4.1% of the population in 2011 to 11.9% in 2041. Also, Peel's older seniors, 75 and over, will make up a larger proportion of the seniors population as the baby boomers age and will require a more intense level of senior services. We can expect to see the 65 to 74 age group tapering off its growth closer to 2041. And that's why you see that flattening of the 65 to 74 age group on the slide above, on the slide ahead. And the reason for that is because the cohort that's moving into that group is smaller than the cohort that's moving out of that group into the 75 to 84 and 85 plus age category. I've fielded a couple of questions about why is that line flat? Is there something happening? But that's why. It's because the cohort that's moving in there is smaller. This trend shows us that a large segment of our population in 2035 will require some level of support for living from government-funded services. And this is my first reference to the village. And you can see that if Peel was a village of 100, there would be 20 seniors living in that village by 2035. Another way to look at the changing population dynamic is the ratio of seniors to working age population. The increasing size of the senior cohort has an effect on the ratio of seniors to working age residents. Here we see that the ratio has significantly narrowed as there are less working age residents to support more seniors. A ratio of 11 to 1 working age in 91 to only 3 by 2035. This will obviously have major impacts in the realms of transportation, health, housing, and service delivery, not to mention the economic impact of this changing ratio along with the labor force makeup. Let's turn our attention to immigration. Immigration, as all of you know, has been a significant factor driving Peel's growth. It's important to note that for the first time, the percent of immigrants as a percent of the total population of Peel has surpassed all other regions in the GTA. Immigration will continue to be one of the main contributors to Peel's future population growth. In addition, Peel's immigrants will be an important factor in adding to our labor force, bringing with it economic growth and prosperity. It is imperative that we shorten the period of time it takes newcomers to be integrated into our community, since Peel's diversity will continue to grow. Lack of timely integration has associated costs at a number of levels. Growing diversity presents new opportunities in building a sense of community in Peel and in contributing to our growing economy. I also want to mention that of the 77 people that we said come to Peel every single day, 50 of those, or 63%, are newcomers. And here's my second reference to the village. If Peel was a village of 100, by 2035, 63 would be immigrants. Let's take a look at another demographic perspective here, low income. 1 in every 8 persons living in Peel lives in low income. And the low income is based on the low income measure from the 2011 census based on 2010 income data. At the provincial level, it's 1 in every 7 people. This becomes even more pronounced for the under 18 age group, where 1 in 6 live in low income. And even more concerning is that 1 in every 6 children under 6 lives in low income. Seniors, on the other hand, have the lowest prevalence of low income, with only 1 in 13 persons. If this trend was to continue into 2035, in that village of 100, 25 would be living in low income. Just for visual purposes, we produced this map to show this is what it looks like to see 1 in every 8 people living in low income, 1 dot representing 500 people. In 2035, this is what the dot would look like, the dot map would look like. That's 1 in every 4 people living in low income. In the previous slide, we discussed the fact that 1 in 8 persons live in low income in Peel. The implications of low income are even more pronounced as families are pushed to spend more than 30% of their income on housing and shelter. More than a quarter of all owner-occupied households spend more than 30% on housing. Almost 42% of all tenant households spend more than 30% of their income on shelter. This situation places many households in precarious circumstances, putting them at risk of losing their homes or becoming homeless. If the trend continues, there'd be 43 people living in low income in the village of 100. Let's take a look at where the workforce is coming from and where the workforce is going to. Peel is doing a good job in creating live-work balanced communities in Peel. 2/3 of all job-related trips, work-related trips, stay in Peel. This is a great opportunity for improving intra-regional transit services. But greater areas of improvement are required for the longer haul distances. The inter-regional transit, which is lacking, the highway improvement that's slow to occur, the GTA-wide transit planning that's lacking from senior levels of government. What we see from these slides is that approximately 63% of those living in Peel that travel to work in Peel. The remaining 37% are commuting to and from Peel and therefore presenting additional pressures on the transportation system. As well, 37% of Peel's workforce is made up of people that are commuting in from surrounding regions, contributing to overall road congestion. These two in and out flows are major factors that influence commute times. The increase in congestion leads to lost productivity, increased emissions, less time spent at home, and reduction in overall quality of life. I just want to finish off this portion of the presentation to say that these implications of demographic trends, once again, can be looked at from many different perspectives, and I've provided some of those perspectives here. And I ask you to keep these in mind as you go through the rest of the sessions this afternoon. And also, you'll see threads of these trends throughout the remaining presentations this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. I'm going to ask Judith McWhinney to come and give us an economic presentation on the economy.
Councillor Medeiros.
For you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Schwartz, just in terms of, I guess, the demographic research that was just presented, I see that it was sourced from 2011. And my understanding, and that seems to be the struggle right now with trying to deal with statistics. Can you just, Mr.
Ron.
Yes, if you can just speak to the difficulty that you're having regarding gathering data for us to be able to make base some of our decisions on, because I know that's policymakers are struggling with that these days.
So you're making reference to the lack of data that's available nationally, and we know that that's a decision that was made by the federal government, and in fact there are decisions that are being made that may impact this even more, because in the long-form census they're now talking about not even collecting income data through the National Household Survey. And we know that the National Household Survey was flawed. It's flawed in many regards. We as a region were very concerned about it when the decision was made. We continue to be concerned about it. We continue to voice it at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Quality of Life Reporting System. Every venue that we possibly can have, we make reference to the fact that this data is critical for our decision making to understand how our communities are changing and transforming. A lot of what I've presented this morning is National Household Survey data. At the scale that I've presented it at, it's okay, but once you start getting into smaller communities, it becomes more problematic. So yes, we're seriously challenged with how to get at and use data that's going to help us to inform decision making in the future.
Thank you very much.
And good morning, Regional Council, staff, and guests. I am grateful for the opportunity to speak to Regional Council about key trends in Peel's economy, their impacts and implications. Let me begin by stating that Peel's economy remains vibrant and strong with an increasingly diversified economic base. The strength in Peel's economy has been supported by key strategic advantages, some of which were mentioned by Ron in his presentation. Its location in the largest economic hub in Canada, the Greater Toronto Area, with close proximity to the U.S. market is one. Our highly developed transportation network consisting of 5 major highways, an international airport, and regional and international rail. These are also strategic advantages that have facilitated growth. This has facilitated national and international trade, amounting to billions of dollars in goods transported through Peel annually. Other strategic advantages include a relatively young population, the youngest among GTA municipalities, as well as a highly educated workforce. Over the past decade, Peel's economy has continued on its long-term growth path, visible in key areas of the economy such as population, the business sector, and although not at the level projected, the number of jobs in Peel has increased. However, as Peel gets larger, the growth rate will continue to slow. In the midst of these positive changes, there have been challenges in some areas of the economy. And these have now positioned Peel's economy on a path that can lead to either positive or negative changes in the future. Regional Council now has the opportunity to think what can be done to mitigate the negatives and enhance the positives to achieve desired positive results. The changes in Peel's economy include broad-based structural shifts, and these are visible in areas such as the business sector, job creation, that's jobs created in Peel, and in the labor market. These 3 graphs show sectoral shifts away from the goods-producing sector towards services. In the top left of this slide is a graph of the shift in Peel's business sector. The graph at the bottom left, it shows the shift which occurred in the jobs which are created in Peel. And the graph at the top right shows the shifting distribution of employment in Peel's labor market, which describes Peel's residents who work anywhere in and out of Peel. As Ron showed in his presentation, most Peel's residents, I think 2/3, work in Peel. This statistic includes those who work elsewhere. The structural shift away from the goods sector was largely a result of a declining manufacturing sector. The shift was influenced mostly by factors external to Peel's economy. One of the most important influences was the appreciation of the Canadian dollar. This slide shows the appreciation of the Canadian dollar, the black line trending upwards, and the annual manufacturing employment in Peel's labor market, which is the orange bar. These are Peel's residents who work in the manufacturing sector. The Canadian dollar started to appreciate in 2003, and beginning 2005, Peel's labor market started to show a downward trend in manufacturing employment. Other external factors have also impacted the manufacturing sector, including the global auto restructuring, as well as the outsourcing to lower cost destinations. Some recent trends have been positive. Since December last year, the Canadian dollar has depreciated 8.6%. This represents an opportunity for export growth from Ontario and Peel, and this includes Peel's manufacturing sector. This slide shows a comparison of the size of the manufacturing sector in Peel in 2001 with the size of the sector years later. These represent the labor market, the business sector, and job creation in Peel. In 2001, if we took a sample of 100 Peel's residents who were employed, or a sample of 100 Peel's businesses, or 100 jobs created in Peel, 22 residents would work in manufacturing. 8 of these 100 businesses would be manufacturing businesses. And 20 of the 100 jobs created in Peel would be in the manufacturing sector. If we took a similar sample of 100 Peel's residents who work, or 100 Peel's businesses in 2014, 14 residents would work in the manufacturing sector, and only 4 businesses would be in manufacturing. That is down from 8 in 2001. In 2011, 15 of 100 jobs created in Peel were in manufacturing, down from 20 in 2001. The sectoral shifts were not the only ones taking place in Peel's economy. Measured by employment size, there was a shift in Peel's businesses. There are 4 colored bubbles on this slide representing the 4 major business sizes: large, medium, small, and indeterminate. And these are defined at the low end of the graph. Starting at the bottom, the black bubble with the arrow pointing to it represents the large business sector. I can appreciate that the black bubbles are hardly visible. It is a relatively small share of Peel's business sector, accounting for 0.1% of the sector during the period. The green bubbles, also very small, represent medium-sized businesses. Note that the green bubbles are trending downwards, meaning that the number of medium-sized businesses is falling. The bubbles are also getting smaller, indicating that its share of the business sector is falling. The red bubbles represent small businesses. The bubble is trending upwards, and they are getting bigger. It means that over the period, small businesses in Peel have increased and have also increased its share of the sector. The blue ball represent businesses classified as indeterminate, also called micro businesses in some academic literature. There was an increase in these businesses prior to the recession, but the sector has lost businesses since. The key message here is that in Peel, small businesses have increased over the past decade, and medium-sized businesses have declined. The rise in small businesses occurred at the same time that we are seeing a reduction in the average number of employees per business, from 8.3% in 2001 to 6.6 persons, from 8.3 persons per business in 2001 to 6.6 persons in 2011. This may be a part of the explanation in the underachievement of employment targets that Ron spoke about. Peel's businesses, on average, are employing less people. This change raises the issue of whether Peel's businesses or Peel's business community should be serviced differently with an increasing number of small businesses, and also whether there is anything that can be done to increase or retain medium-sized businesses in Peel. If current trends continue, the attainment of employment targets in Peel will be further jeopardized. We now turn to the labor market, and this describes Peel's residents who work anywhere inside and outside of Peel. Peel's labor market has shown a long-term shift away from the goods sector, as we have seen, towards services. And this was exaggerated during the recession, when the loss of manufacturing jobs accounted for 1/3 of the total loss in Peel. Peel lost 97,000 jobs approximately during the recession, and 33,000 were manufacturing jobs. So led by the loss of employment in manufacturing, Peel's labor market suffered proportionally a greater impact than the national and the provincial labor market, as you can see from that first set of bars from the left. In 2014, employment in Peel's labor market remained 5.6%, or 37,000 positions below what it was before the recession. This contrasts to the national and provincial labor markets, where within 2 years of the recession, all the jobs lost at the province and at the national level were regained. In the previous slide, we have seen the changes in the sectoral composition and the mix of businesses. And employment has not recovered fully since the recession. Some jobs have not come back. These changes are having an effect on other areas in Peel, including the assessment base and Peel's revenue mix. This slide shows two graphs. The top graph shows the long-term growth in Peel's total taxable assessment base. The base continues to grow, as you can see with those red bar graphs. However, the pace of growth has slowed, as represented by the blue line. As we get bigger, growth will continue to slow. Recent growth in Peel has been attributed to growth in Brampton and Caledon, where residential growth leads. As such, we have seen the mix of assessment growth shifted towards the residential subsector. With these trends, the result include a shortfall in DC revenues, shortfall in employment creation, and a decline in the proportion of non-residential tax revenue. These trends are not in line with forecast, nor what would be desirable in a healthy growth mix. Since the recent recession, we have also seen some new trends emerge, and these include a rise in precarious employment. These are employment with less security, that do not guarantee tenure or benefit, or some of the benefits that we come to expect from our jobs. In this regard, we have seen in Peel's labor market a rise in part-time employment, while full-time employment is declining. We have also seen a rise in self-employment, while private sector employment has fallen. This trend may be part of the reason why, as you will see today in the display on Focus GTA information, that one of the areas of concern for Peel residents is their future financial security. Alongside the rise in precarious employment since the recession, Peel's unemployment rate has also remained elevated, and the gap between Peel's unemployment rate and that of Ontario and Canada have widened. This is particularly true for the youth, and this describes labor market participants who are 15 to 24 years old. The youth labor market has experienced a fall in employment throughout the recession, as well as since the recession. Many have left the labor market, some of whom have entered college. In 2013, there was a 5% increase in college entrance in Ontario, and that was the strongest increase in a decade. Unemployment rates can be influenced by many variables, including a variation in employment levels, as well as the decision whether or not to participate in the labor market. If you are not working, but not actually looking for a job, that is participating, you are not considered a part of the unemployed population. The participation rate in Peel, which is the proportion of Peel's residents 15 years and over who are participating in the economy through either being employed or looking for work, has fallen, particularly since the recession years. The employment rate, which refers to those who are employed, that has also fallen. If some Peel's residents did not leave the workforce, that is, if they did not withdraw from the labor force, Peel's unemployment rate in 2014 would be closer to 12%. The high unemployment rate in Peel contributed to increased demand from the Ontario Works program. These changes are also consistent with the information from Ontario Municipal Service Association that you will also see exhibited today. And that says approximately 80% of Peel's residents identify 2 areas that they think should be the top of government's development priorities. And these are job opportunities by encouraging the development of existing businesses and labor market, as well as encouraging the development of new industries for youth employment. The lower participation rate among Peel's youth is represented on this slide by the falling blue bubble. The weak labor market for youth, particularly since the recession, has contributed to this. Peel's youth labor market lost jobs during the recession, as you can see from the graph on your right. All employment gains in the post-recession period went to the adult 25 years and over market segment. Peel's youth continued to lose jobs even after the recession. Further, as represented by the red bubble on the graph to your left, the number of Peel's residents 65 years and over in the labor market and their participation rate is trending upwards. It means that an increasing proportion of a larger seniors population is remaining or opting to stay in the labor market. Given that in Ron's presentation, 2/3 of Peel's residents work in Peel, increasing the number of jobs in Peel will play an important role in reducing Peel's unemployment rate and improving labor market conditions for Peel's residents. We have just reviewed a number of key changes in Peel's economy, many of which are adverse. These are some of the current challenges that the economy faces. However, there are numerous opportunities. Peel's competitive advantages remain: our location, our infrastructure, the educated workforce, and the young population. And recent changes such as the fall in oil price, the depreciation of the Canadian dollar, and the low interest rate environment in which we now operate all favor Peel's economy. The economy now is more diverse. The economic base is now better positioned to withstand future economic shocks should they occur. Further, current changes in the labor market may present short-term challenges, but may be a source of future opportunities for building a new entrepreneurial community that will help to grow Peel's non-residential sector. An educated workforce that is increasingly self-employed offers that potential for a vibrant entrepreneurial community in Peel. Therefore, despite the numerous challenges, Peel's economy remains remains positioned to take advantage of economic opportunities as they emerge. However, this will require some thought regarding approaches to embracing the changes in Peel's economy and making it work to Peel's advantage in building an economy of the future, a future which is likely to be very different from the past, as we saw in Ron's presentation. Today represents an opportunity to continue the dialogue on approaches that can best support Peel's economy to remain vibrant, growing, and creating quality jobs for Peel's residents. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Judith. I don't see any questions. Dr. Eileen de Villa will now give us an update on health status.
Good morning. So, Chair Dale, members of council, staff, and guests, in the next few minutes, I'd like to just give you a high-level overview of some key considerations impacting on the health status of Peel's residents. So first, let's look at one of the most basic indicators of health status, which is data on mortality. So in front of you, you have a slide looking at the leading causes of mortality in Peel. And as you can see from the slide, the mortality experience in Peel is very typical for what is seen in the developing world, namely that causes of death are related to chronic diseases, and that we're also seeing a general increase in life expectancy. Even in the period of time as recently as the intervening period between 1986 and 2011, you can see that for both men and women in Peel, life expectancy at birth has increased significantly, even over that short period of time. And you do see as well that women do continue to maintain a certain life expectancy advantage over men. Turning now to the other end of the life spectrum, let's look at Peel's birth rates. So with over 15,000 births in Peel in 2013, the birth rate in Peel is relatively high compared to the provincial rate. However, as shown on this slide, the difference between Peel's birth rate and the provincial birth rate is decreasing, and Peel's birth rate is in fact stabilizing. So we've heard a little bit about mortality and a little bit about birth. What of all the years in the middle? So turning to that now, we know that the experience of good health in these years in between is impacted by a number of risk factors. So just to take your attention to some of the risk factors that I think are worthy of your attention, let's look at this slide talking about risk factors and related health outcomes. We know that there are risk factors. The risk factor of tobacco use, for example, is associated with negative health outcomes including cancer and ischemic heart disease, pulmonary disease, and low birth weight babies. When you look at a risk factor like excessive alcohol use, we see that it too has a connection to cancer, to cirrhosis of the liver, mental disorders that are related to alcohol use, and stroke. Physical inactivity, another important malaise, particularly in the Western world, of which Peel is very typical, associated with cancer, heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and hypertension. And finally, and somewhat related, of course, to physical inactivity, are the issues of overweight and obesity. And as you see on the slide, again, a number of negative health outcomes associated with this particular risk factor. So what then is the particular experience in Peel as we look at these risk factors? On this slide, we demonstrate some of the current trends in respect of the risk factors I've just described and some important emerging issues on those risk factors that are worthy of Council's consideration as you embark on the strategic planning process. So looking at tobacco, we do know that smoking rates are declining and that the current rate, or the rate in 2011-2012 in Peel, is about 14.2%. We are doing better than the province in this regard. However, the job is not yet done here. Smoking rates are particularly high amongst younger males, aged 19 to 49, and when you look at the numbers overall, there are still over 160,000 smokers in the region of Peel. And smoking has very significant impact, not only on healthcare and healthcare costs, but there are a number of indirect costs, including lost productivity, that are related to tobacco use, and this is not insignificant. There are also a number of new tobacco products on the market. Flavored tobaccos and e-cigarettes are innovations that are being promulgated by the tobacco industry to try to lure new smokers into this very dangerous health behavior. And certainly we're also seeing hookah or water pipe establishments throughout the region of Peel as well. In respect of alcohol, we do know that through current survey data that about 64% of Peel residents are current drinkers, meaning that they drank alcohol at least at one point in the past year. Now, you know, the 1 point in the year may not be that much of an issue, but I'd like to call your attention to some of the trends that we see in terms of alcohol use. Almost 3,500 visits to the emergency room that are related to alcohol on an annual basis. And, you know, startlingly, 12% of Peel residents describe themselves as having drinking or partaking in binge drinking, meaning that they drink 5 or more drinks on one occasion at least once per month in the past year. This is pretty significant, a very significant level of drinking, and certainly in terms of impact on our community, one only needs to consult with our colleagues in paramedics or at Peel Regional Police to understand that there are significant first responder issues in our community related to excessive alcohol use, to speak nothing of the effects on families and workplaces in respect of alcohol use. Looking at physical inactivity, we know that over half of Peel's population is physically inactive. Unfortunately, this trend has remained quite stable over time. We also know through our survey data that the rates of inactivity are high amongst immigrants in particular, and that our school children, very unfortunately, have poor cardiovascular fitness. Some of the issue in respect to physical inactivity is the nature of the way our community is designed. Ron talked a little bit in his presentation about commute times, and I should point out to members of council that overall in Peel, our residents experience relatively long commute times compared to other Ontarians. The commute time for the average commute time for a Peel resident is roughly 30 minutes. For the Ontario resident at large, it's about 21 minutes. So things that we need to be mindful of are the inactive immigrant population, particularly those that have other predisposing risk factors for chronic diseases such as diabetes. We're also should be mindful of the use of electronics or screen time by our youth and the increase that we're seeing in this regard. And certainly, as I've mentioned to council through previous presentations, there's an important role of the built environment in terms of facilitating daily physical activity for our residents. Finally, we know that over half of Peel's population is overweight or obese. Unfortunately, this trend too has remained stable over time. And as I'm sure council needs no education on, this particular risk factor clearly has important impact in respect of chronic disease. As it turns out, unfortunately, though, chronic disease is not the end of the story. There are also significant impacts associated with communicable disease in our community. If you were to listen to media reports, you might think that such things as Ebola are the kinds of threats that we need to worry about in our community. And while we certainly did need to think about and prepare for that, the more important communicable disease issues facing our community are listed on this slide. So for us in Peel, sexually transmitted infections are in fact on the rise, with chlamydia, gonorrhea, and syphilis representing almost 60% of reportable diseases in Peel in 2014. What's particularly of note about this as well is that unfortunately, with gonorrhea in particular, we are experiencing a certain amount of antibiotic resistance. It's not the only bacteria to which that is starting to display antibiotic resistance, but this is something that we need to keep an eye out for because as bacteria develop resistance to the antibiotics that we use to treat, we run out of treatment options. On the plus side, we do have high immunization rates in Peel, as indicated on this slide, with 97% coverage for measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines among 7 and 17-year-olds in our jurisdiction. Interestingly enough, our immigrant and diverse population does raise some interesting features in respect of communicable diseases in our community. We do have relatively high tuberculosis rates, given that much of our diverse population hails from the parts of the world where tuberculosis disease is endemic. So we do have about double the rate of tuberculosis relative to the provincial rate. We also have some travel-associated illness requiring additional focus on prevention for those of us in Peel Public Health, which includes immunization. So just to characterize this a little bit further for you, I can show you here on this slide that we have particular enteric diseases that are travel-related that are especially prominent in Peel. You'll see here on the slide that we have a fair amount of typhoid and paratyphoid fever here in Peel. I think of note, Peel's population probably comprises about 10% of the province-ish. But as it turns out, in respect of typhoid and paratyphoid disease, we account for over 40% of the cases in the province, given that a significant proportion of our population travels to a part of the world where the risk of acquiring typhoid and paratyphoid disease is quite high. This isn't to say that immigrant health is all a bad news story. And in fact, looking at this slide, I think it's important for Council to note that while there are unique factors and unique risk factors that having a very mobile immigrant population brings to this region, immigrants do in fact experience longer life expectancy and lower mortality rates than the Canadian-born population. If I can call your attention to a few details on this slide, which many members of Council may have in fact seen before, what you have here is remaining life expectancy at age 25 for men by immigrant status and by income level. On the left-hand side of the slide, you see those who are at the lowest income level. On the right-hand side of the slide, you see those at the highest level of income. And with the darker blue bars, you see immigrants, and in the light blue bars, you have the non-immigrants. So you'll see that there is a gradient, that the higher the income, the longer the life expectancy. But what's striking about this is that that income gradient and the benefit in life expectancy is particularly striking for the non-immigrant group. But across the board, you see that immigrants do enjoy longer life expectancy and lower mortality rates than the Canadian-born population. Looking at how immigrant status affects other risk factors at a very high level, without getting into great detail, I can tell you that tobacco and alcohol use are actually higher amongst the Canadian-born population compared to immigrants as well. So here on this slide, you have current smoking by immigrant status and by sex. On the left-hand side, you have recent immigrants. Middle of the slide, long-term immigrants, and on the right-hand side of the graph, non-immigrants. You see that men are smoking at a higher rate than women overall across all immigrant status groups, but with recent immigrants having the lowest levels of tobacco use, as shown in this slide. So with that, what is the takeaway message or the concept that I would like Council to think about as you embark on the strategic planning process? I think if there's one message that I would like to leave you with, it's that health status of a population is determined by so much more than just biology, genetics, or access to health care or health services. Over the last 40 years, we've had a growing understanding and an increased appreciation for what actually makes a population healthy and what keeps a population healthy. And as shown on this slide, there are some biological, genetic, and health care factors that are involved in terms of creating and maintaining a healthy population. However, what really makes the difference are the many other factors shown on this slide. Income, social status, social support networks, healthy child development, education and literacy, as we've heard from my colleagues Ron and Judith, employment and working conditions, and the physical and social environment. These are the most important factors. Absolutely, age and sex, health, access to health care, these are important considerations too, but it's the determinants and the social determinants of health that play a significant role in terms of creating and maintaining the health of a population. So, as we collectively launch into this strategic planning process, I would encourage Council to capitalize on this opportunity, this very unique opportunity, to create and enhance the circumstances in our environment to promote health, particularly through activities, interventions, and policies focused on our physical, social, and economic environments, and to actively use a health frame while considering different courses of action to guide the future. So with that, thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Eileen.
You're welcome.
Well, now, I don't see any questions. I'll ask David Arbuckle come down and talk about the federal and provincial environment and its impact on Peel.
Good morning, Regional Chair. Good morning, Council. In this presentation, I'm going to briefly just speak to the political and policy environment of the federal and provincial orders of government. Unlike the information presented earlier this morning, we'll be focusing more on the immediate future and this term of Council. There's little advantage in attempting to project what will happen with senior orders of government over the next 20 years. If anybody knows what's going to happen over the next 20 years, please feel free to let me know. However, as you all know, actions taken by both federal and provincial governments can have a significant impact on decision-making, on decisions being made locally here in Peel. We believe it is important for Council to understand where government policy potentially impacts Peel's overall direction, both positively and negatively. My goal this morning is to briefly describe Peel's place from a government context, highlight where things stand from the current election cycles, and point out at a high level where alignment and challenges exist between municipal need and senior government mandates. We felt it was important to highlight some of the major responsibilities of the four orders of government here in Peel and stress the interjurisdictional interconnectivity involved. There are significant examples of where decisions made by other orders of government will have a spillover effect on municipalities. For example, federal decisions on immigration can impact municipal growth, social programs, public health, economic development, public transit, and so on. Provincial decisions on transportation and public transit have significant impact on everything from taxation to planning to health to poverty. Understanding our connection to policy decisions made by other orders of government is an important consideration for you, as you work to determine the region's future direction. Another point we wanted to emphasize is how unique the Ontario municipal relationship is in regard to service delivery compared to other provinces. Municipalities in Ontario are responsible for delivering a number of services that traditionally have been delivered at the provincial level elsewhere. A number of human services, public health are the most glaring examples. However, the municipal provision of long-term care and paramedic services in Ontario is also rare compared to other provinces. These added responsibilities place Ontario municipalities, especially regional governments like Peel, in an increasingly complex jurisdictional environment. This relationship is further complicated by the fact that Peel is required by legislation to be service system manager in a number of these policy areas. The overlying message is that in order for Peel and Brampton, Caledon, Mississauga, and the municipal sector as a whole to achieve its success, it needs to understand the direction of government and work collaboratively with them. The purpose of this slide is to remind Regional Council where things stand in regards to the federal and provincial election cycles. There will be a federal election in 2015, likely in October, although a spring election call is still possible. Just 2 days ago, the federal government released its 2015 budget. The most significant budget item from a municipal perspective was related to a new public transit fund aimed at major transit infrastructure projects starting in 2017 and 2018. As we move closer to a potential election, public opinion polls are becoming more frequent. And as is typical, the poll results vary greatly, from maintaining the status quo to a turnover in government with different majority and minority government situations mixed in. The main point here really for Council is that with any election, there is uncertainty going forward with whom will be making policy decisions at the federal level during this term of Regional Council. The provincial situation is more stable and predictable from an electoral perspective, given the recent election of a majority government. The next provincial election will not occur until October 2018, or the end of this council's term. As you can see from the screen, we've tweaked the slide that you originally received, mainly because of the sort of later announcement of the provincial budget. But in about 5 hours, 5 or 6 hours, the provincial budget will be released. Over the last 2 weeks, the government has announced a number of budget items, including the government's intention to move forward with significant investments in transit infrastructure funding. At the bottom of the slide, we've demonstrated the current representation, both federally and provincially, here in Peel. I think it's interesting to note that that 3 new ridings will be contested in Peel this federal election, bringing the total number of electoral districts in Peel to 12. Federally, this is the 3rd most number of seats in a municipal area, behind only Toronto and Montreal. The most relevant information for Regional Council is to look at government mandates. Mandates provide municipal councils or municipal governments with a window into government decision-making and to prepare council for potential opportunities and challenges. Since obtaining a majority government in 2011, the federal government publicly has emphasized economic recovery from the 2008 recession, in addition to balancing the federal budget. In the 2015 budget just released this week, I think that messaging has remained consistent. The outcome of the federal election will, of course, have some impact on municipal policy during this term of Regional Council and likely beyond. Again, provincially, the policy picture is somewhat clearer. In September 2014, ministerial mandate letters were made public for the first time ever. The letters essentially outline what the government wants to do over the next 4 years. Regional staff has reviewed the letters, and a number of common themes across different ministries have become apparent, and those themes are outlined specifically on the slide there. By having this type of information and conducting this type of analysis, we can begin to look at the current and future alignments and identify where challenges still exist. We are confident that having and understanding this context will assist Council in decision-making in relation to the region's future direction. So now that we have a stronger sense where senior orders of government are headed, at least at the provincial level, the next 2 slides speak at a high level to where there is alignment with some traditional regional and municipal policy priorities and where challenges continue to exist. Provincially, the government is currently active in a number of areas of great importance to Peel and your area municipalities. For example, as we know, the province is developing a climate change strategy, a number of announcements in relation to transit and transportation infrastructure. The government has been very active on the modernization of the child care system, mainly as a result of the full-day kindergarten initiative. The government is in the process of renewing its the poverty reduction strategy. And in addition, has turned some attention to the aging population concerns and has adopted a seniors action plan. Federally, working through the province, the government is allocating sorely needed resources in the area of public transit and housing, mainly through the New Building Canada Fund and the renewed investment in affordable housing program. While it's encouraging to see a number of key alignments between Peel and area municipal needs and senior government initiatives, alignment should not be confused with solutions. Despite an infusion of infrastructure dollars both federally and provincially, gridlock and pressure on existing and need for future infrastructure will continue. Despite alignment with some social policies, youth unemployment, challenges to immigration settlement and integration, and the chronic underfunding of certain social and community health services in Peel will continue. Part of the identified challenge is the lack of national strategies in key areas of Peel and area municipal interest, such as climate change, housing, and transit. Another challenge is the absence of collaboration between governments. This is especially prevalent in areas where no national strategy exists, but also it exists in areas like aging population, goods movement, and poverty. So I think, as you can see, there's considerable linkages between the challenges presented here and also those presented by Judith Ron and Dr. Davila this morning. Lastly, I just wanted to touch briefly on the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, AMO, or the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, FCM. Despite our size, the region is only one voice of 444 municipalities in Ontario and 3,643 across the country. Often the most listened to voice at the provincial and federal orders is that of AMO and FCM, respectively. So what issues are these organizations pursuing on our behalf? At AMO, emergency services costs and infrastructure and housing investments remains high on their priority list. However, there's one emerging issue, municipal fiscal health, that Council should be aware of. Recently, AMO struck a working group to investigate a common approach to determine fiscal health for municipalities. This work is important as AMO prepares for the end of the Provincial Municipal Fiscal Service Delivery Review, or the uploading agreement that ends in 2018. Concludes in 2018. AMO in the very near future will want to discuss what's next in regard to future uploads or revenue tools, and understanding overall municipal fiscal health will assist in supporting a future discussion, negotiation with the provincial government. In a recent meeting with AMO staff, they've confirmed that in the coming weeks they will be releasing a What's Next Ontario document that will help facilitate this discussion. FCM, as with the federal government itself, is very much focused on the 2015 election. Through their hometown campaign, FCM is focusing on similar issues to AMO. Infrastructure, especially on the water wastewater side, housing, transportation and transit, policing, and the environment are key focuses of FCM. The region's ability to provide data and information to our municipal sector associations, especially in key areas of alignment, can be an important component to achieving any outcome that Council will prioritize through this process. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, David. Just a couple of points. The first one is on the aging population. I'm not quite sure what has been invested, how much has been invested in terms of dealing with aging population, because I know that I hear from, and I'm sure all of us in Caledon hear from our seniors, and they're facing some huge challenges. Part of that is housing. There's a shortage, as we know, of affordable housing for seniors. And so I guess my question is, what has the province done? I see it on the slide that they're addressing aging population, but I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, I think mainly what the province has done is actually set up it's really more of a framework in relation to how they're going to move forward in coordinating and addressing some of the aging populations concerned provincially. I can't speak specifically to the initiatives within that. I'm not sure whether Commissioner Smith or her team may have a specific comment in relation to that. One of the things that we have addressed, though, is that there isn't necessarily the amount of alignment between what we have, some of the issues that we have addressed locally, and where the province currently is standing in relation to how they are planning on addressing the aging population issue. But I'll leave it at that for now. But we can gather some more detailed information for you, Councillor Groves. If you'd like to
that would be great, because then it's something that we can take it back to our seniors. We do have a seniors advisory committee in Caledon, and these are some of the things that especially the housing challenge, is what they keep bringing forward to us, the lack of. The other thing is affordable housing. I guess I'm not sure when they downloaded affordable housing to the region, but that was many, many years ago. And again, the wait list for affordable housing I don't know, it's 20 years? I have no idea. So the province, again, has this on their list. What exactly are they planning on doing about it? Are they planning on uploading it again, or what are they doing?
I necessarily wouldn't take it that far, but I know during the last provincial.
Worth a try.
Yeah, I know during the last provincial municipal fiscal service delivery, during that discussion, obviously social housing was a really key focus of that discussion. The province has moved forward with a affordable housing strategy, and they also just recently announced an update that they will be updating that strategy and doing some consultations in relation to that strategy. There have been, as mentioned in the slide, there have been some investments from a capital perspective through the investment in affordable housing strategy. But however, as we've emphasized, that is not going to fill the need, obviously in a growing population like Peel. And again, Commissioner Menard or Janet may have an additional comment in relation.
Actually, David, do you have a comment with respect to that?
We're slipping into the next section. Councillor Groves, you're one step ahead of me on this. The plan now is really to think about the information and trends that have been identified by staff. And really what we've said is these trends that we've identified will probably occur in Peel if past experience continues unchanged. And the whole purpose of the strategic plan is to take the time to identify what of those trends we would like to maintain. Say, for example, a diversified economy, and what of those trends would we want to try and change, such as rising rates of poverty. And the strategic plan will put in place the policies and direction, hopefully that will lead us to a better future than the future that will naturally occur if not influenced. And what we want to do in the next part of this discussion now is really turn it back to Council to do exactly what you've done. Identified the key issues, seniors, affordable housing. Just as succinctly as that, we have staff at the back who are actually recording the issues that you're going to identify over the next 15 minutes or so, and those will magically, through the magic of technology, appear in the workshops when we break into the workshop sessions so that you can discuss them in more detail in the sessions.
So
And
I'll
we'll-
save my list then of the
Please,
other, okay.
well, if you could identify your list of issues, and then
Yes.
in the facilitated discussions we'll have with you, you'll be able to explore them in more detail and help to start shape the direction of the strategic plan.
So I've got my list.
Just before we go into that, I do
Okay.
have Mayor Jeffrey on the list.
Okay, thank
Mayor Jeffrey?
David, I just wanted to say how much I think your particular role, and certainly of all of our communities, has changed from a government relations perspective in the last year or so. The fact that you have access to a ministerial letter that really is the homework for the minister for the next foreseeable future is unusual and never happened when I was at the province. That really helps us know where the government is going. And I think that there are multiple sources of information, and you're giving us a snapshot right now, but it's a snapshot that keeps changing. And as legislators, we have a responsibility to help inform the information that you get and assemble it together. And I guess I would caution against using groups like AMO as the source of information. The reason I say that is they don't represent all municipalities across Ontario. They maybe represent half, and it's the vocal majority that end up dictating what happens at AMO, and I know that because I met with them every month for like a year. So it's an interesting snapshot, but it's not always the way government goes. The other thing is the Premier has made it a priority to be meeting with the large urban mayors and the civic leaders on an extraordinarily regular basis, and she's meeting with her Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, which is kind of unheard of in the past, that we've never seen that kind of involvement. So it's up to us to take those opportunities as often as possible and make sure that we align our agenda with the province, but also there are windows of time when you can insert your issue into those conversations, and we can't miss those opportunities. So as often as possible, and I know the region has been very successful at meeting with ministers at AMO and other Roma-Ogra opportunities, and I can tell you that the region is very well respected because of the preparation that is done. So to continue that positive relationship is very important and has been very well received in the past. So it's just a compliment to the staff's preparation and the good news stories that they come in with that are often used. I know that ministers have taken those good stories and repeated them elsewhere, which has helped improve our reputation. So we're in a good place, and I think that we can build on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parrish.
Well, I'd like to reinforce what Mayor Jeffrey said. I don't particularly put a lot of faith in AMO. When I was up in Ottawa, they used to come up and ask for money for social housing, but nobody ever took the money once it was sitting in a pot. Nobody ever implemented it because they had all kinds of reasons for saying, well, who's going to maintain these buildings? Who's going to pay for the cost of keeping people in them? One of the things your government did while you were still there was it mandated, despite AMO, basement apartments. And when you brought that in and said there shall be basement apartments legalized all over the province, everybody dug in, stuck their jaws out, and made rules that are so tough. I have somebody going through the Committee of Adjustment today that spent $14,000 to upgrade his basement, and he now has to go through the Committee of Adjustment to legalize a driveway by about 1.5 feet that's been like that for 20 years. So what we have not done is taken advantage of the simplest way of giving affordable housing to people, which is legalizing basement apartments and making it easy to do and inexpensive. So I was very excited when you guys brought that in, and then I was less excited to watch our city council in Mississauga come up with rules that are absolutely untenable. I think of 33,000 illegal apartments in Mississauga, we have 12 legalized, and that's taken a year. So at that rate, people will be on a waiting list until they're dead as seniors at 88 or 86. So I just think that is the simplest solution. I don't think we should be coming up with individual little solutions within the region. I think we should come up with a solution here and say to Brampton, in Mississauga and Caledon, we're going to be unified on this, and we're going to make this work, and we're going to come in with things that are simple. No, you're shaking your head. No way Mississauga is telling Brampton what to do. The point is, I think we can work together, and we can come up with a solution that's going to be simple, that's going to be economical, and that's going to get the 33,000 illegal apartments into safe, legal apartments. And we're going to get a lot of people off that waiting list, because the 33,000 in Mississauga will probably double. So you did a great job. AMO didn't follow through, and neither did the local council. So this is one of those things where you run in little circles, and nothing good ever happens. And I thought the stat back at the beginning when I first came in at only 7.8 poor seniors. Those are people like me. I'm a senior, proudly. And I had a job that paid a pension, and I had a job all the time that gave me benefits. And I got through to this age despite binge drinking. Did I admit that? Well, it says once a month. Come on, guys. When my daughter was taking kinesiology, I had to put down everything I ate and drank for 3 weeks, and she came back after analyzing it at York and said alcohol was a food group for me. But anyway, and I didn't think I was bad. Despite that, the next batch of seniors, which we are expecting, are working as consultants. They're working under contract. They don't have jobs that pay good benefits. They don't have jobs that are giving them guaranteed pensions. That 7.8% is going to grow into a pile of people who have problems in 20 years. We have to anticipate that as well. We can't smugly say the seniors are the rich people in this society. And they also have to start taking care of the 20% of the teenagers that are hanging around the house and the 20-year-olds that can't find jobs. There's a lot of stress on seniors these days. So a lot of this is good. It's good information, but we got to start getting strings and pulling it all together and making things happen from it. And that's my rant for the day.
That's what we're hoping to do.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it back over to you and Council now to continue to identify the key issues that we want to discuss in the workshops. So I've heard aging and supports to people, aged population, affordable housing, a number of issues related to affordable housing, income, poverty, especially amongst an aging population, supports to families. I don't have all the ideas.
You have the good ones, though.
No.
Councillor Nika.
You may have touched upon it, David, but one of the ones that I'll go back to the European model,
building communities where you can age in place. As I always refer to Paris, France, as a great example where they were designed, the arrondissement of France, the 22, I believe it's 22 that they have, were deliberately designed that if you walked out your door, and this is physically, and you went 500 meters this way or 500 meters the other way, every human need you possibly had was addressed. So there was the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, municipal offices, a fire hall, whatever you might have required, you would have had. And we're far from that. In fact, one of the jokes, that's a true story, I've used that in a friend, and we went to Paris now, and we absolutely loved it, and we stayed on a flat that was above a bakery, and isn't this amazing? And I said, isn't that funny? I'm trying to build that in our community. They go, what, are you a barbarian? A bakery next door to me, they go to work at 4 in the morning, and I'll hear the doors banging, and I go, you just spent $20,000 to rave about how beautiful those communities are there. Then the second we want to put somebody closer and intensify and mixed use, et cetera, they all think we're barbarians. And that's the only solution, that we get people out of cars, they can walk, because otherwise you've got to deliver. I remember when my father had to age in place in his home, his 4 kids had to take the car away. We had to deliver everything to him because he couldn't easily take transit. And in the old European cities, they get out and walk to it, and the farmers markets and the things of that sort. So I don't know if that's a concept in and of itself. I know it relates to a lot of things. But the aging in place, livable city that you can walk about under the European model. Of course, they got to build cities when nobody knew what an elevator was and a car was. That was a big advantage as well. But be that as it may.
Grant thinks we should take a road trip.
Yeah. Oh.
Councillor Shaughnessy.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just thinking here, we're talking about seniors, but for the first time in history, we have seniors looking after seniors because people are living longer and they need relief. They need relief in their homes. So it's something that I'd like to see us address in our work sessions.
Okay. Geez, I'm always telling everybody how we got so many bright minds around here, and I'm just waiting for you to jump in. It can just be one word, eh, David? Like just
Can be one.
Yeah, sentence, a word, whatever comes to mind. There we go. Mayor Jeffrey.
I'll give you 2. I guess for me, the employment piece is very important. If you don't have a job, it impacts everything else. So certainly, I'm focusing on it as a mayor in Brampton and trying to find a way to I talk about when I ran and when I was elected, what Brampton used to be. It used to be Flower City. It used to be focused on horticulture, and then it became a community that focused on the automotive sector, and that was our strength. I don't think that's our strength on a future basis. That market is going to Poland and Mexico and other places. So I think we need to find a new way to deliver the kind of service or job market and opportunities for our young people, because if we don't, they're going to leave and they're never going to come back. So that's something that's important. And as a former Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, housing is very important. And I like Councillor Parrish's idea of trying to find a way to combine what the 3 communities are doing in a very practical way. Accessory units is a very simple way to address those issues for students, for seniors. I'd like us to be the most accessible community anywhere in Ontario, if possible. That would be one of my goals. If you get housing right, it impacts everything else. Because people who don't have housing, their health suffers, their families suffer. It has a huge ripple effect throughout our community. So if we were to do something even small, it would have such a huge ripple effect on all of our residents. So those are my priorities.
So true. Councillor Miles.
See, you said there was some bright minds around here, so it just sparked all of this conversation. I guess when I look at all of the issues that are facing us today in regards to the aging population and the health issues that we're facing as a community, you tie that into what Nando talked about in regards to livable communities. I really think that there is something in all of this where we need to be taking a look at our overall lifestyle, because if people are active, they're going to be healthier, they're going to live longer, but there's going to be less need for the support of our healthcare system. If you have livable neighborhoods or livable communities, then people look after one another. They know where the senior citizens live. Communities that are designed for the young and the old support everyone. So I really think we've talked about this over the years in regards to housing and development and health, but it really does all come back to creating an environment or creating a culture within our communities where people care about one another, they support one another, they are engaged with one another, they're active, and they're healthy. And I mean, we even just something like snow removal, and we worry about our seniors for snow removal, but wouldn't you think in a caring neighborhood or a caring environment that people would look after the senior citizens in the neighborhood, that they would shovel the snow? So that's kind of where I'm going with all of this. Housing is absolutely a piece of it, but it's how we plan these communities and how they link with one another, I think is what we need to take a look at.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Downey.
Thank you. Through you. I missed my opportunity to ask Dr. DeVilla this question, but I'm wondering about health education for newcomers. 60% of our population will be new Canadians, so I think that probably a priority would be integration strategy for immigrants in health. And then networking. I know the school boards have really good intake programs for families, newcoming families. What's your mandate for health education in that regard?
So through you, Mr. Chair, there are a number of activities that we're engaged in with the various school boards, and we're actually just about to meet with our school board partners to talk about very specific goals that we can agree to and to have partnerships on areas that we would specifically like to see in the coming years with our community. So we're about to engage in that process. We're already working with them, but it's in a more ad hoc method, I would say, and our plan is to actually engage in very specific partnership agreements. But if I can speak to the point of education, education is an important element, don't get me wrong, and health education or being aware of what makes sense in terms of good health behaviors is an important component. But one of the things that's perhaps even more important is creating the environment that allows people to do the right things to support their health. So it's a combination of these two things.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess the other things that I see as a challenge that we need to look at is families who have children or young adults who are suffering from various disabilities, i.e. autism and other challenges that they're having. While they're in school, there are programs in place for them, but when they graduate, it stops. And it's becoming a challenge for the parents and the caregivers, and it becomes a snowball effect because the parents are 24/7 providing care, and it affects their health. And so I guess I'd like to see that become a focus. I know that the province is working on a strategy or a program, but I guess, I continue to hear that they're working on these programs, and it's all wonderful, and it's great, and they collect data. But I'm just interested in where the money is coming from and when the money is coming, because while they have all these things in place, it's wonderful, but if there's no money to actually implement what they have, well, we're still behind the eighth ball. So that's one of the things that I'd like to see addressed. The other thing is in David's presentation, he spoke about infrastructure. As we know it relates to the growth plan. We continue to get more numbers, and Peel has to take more numbers, and we all have to take them. But I don't see any money being invested really from the province, or maybe I'm not aware of money being invested in the infrastructure. And the infrastructure doesn't necessarily mean the hard pipes and stuff in the ground, but it's also around the social services and health services as well, because it's not always about the pipes and all of that when you're taking the growth, but it's also about all those other soft services. So I guess I'd like to see if there's dollars being allocated or they're intending to allocate dollars to the region and to the municipalities. And preventative, I don't think we forget always about preventative. And Dr. Davila, to your presentation, all the things that you've listed in there, I think revolves around preventative. And if we can invest money into preventing all of these things, then it's certainly a lot cheaper than trying to cure some of these things. So for me, I see preventative as a real, should be front and center, because it's that old saying, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. So that's my take on these. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Crombie.
Thank you. I think that Nando had it right when he talked about livable, workable communities, and I think they lead to healthy, vibrant communities, and I know that's certainly one of my goals. So, creating a place where people, creating space, interesting space, and a place where residents can live and work, and I think that leads to healthy communities and vibrant communities. And I think the two components of that are jobs and bones. And jobs, we need to continue to attract new investment. We need to retain the businesses we have and grow the number of businesses. And I think we create employment, and I think that's what we are all here to do. And when there's employment and people have jobs, they can have housing, they can pay for housing. I think there's a little chicken and egg cycle happening there. So if they have jobs, they'll be able to source the housing that is appropriate for them. And then there's the bones that Annette was talking about, the infrastructure investments. And of course, we all feel a little bit blessed this morning that a large investment was made into Peel, into Brampton, Mississauga, for our transportation transit network. But that has to continue. Of course, we need to continue to make those kinds of investments to ensure that we do grow and we do provide a quality of life for our residents and our businesses, and that businesses do want to locate in Peel, in Brampton, Mississauga, because there is great quality of life, livable, walkable communities, and also a transportation network to get them where they need to go. So I think it's all about quality of life for our residents, livable, walkable, healthy, vibrant communities. Thank you.
Councilor Medeiros.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the general themes have already been captured by many of the comments before. So I'll just maybe specify one of the major concerns, and I've worked in labor market policy for several years, and there seems to be still, when I'm encountering, and this is where entering into politics, as you take sort of the theoretical, in a classroom setting or in an office setting, when you actually go knock on doors, to see how difficult it is for new Canadians to enter the labor market, the quality of labor market opportunities. And I know there's been some good work, having the chance to speak with Ms. Menard about some of the labor market programs that the province is providing. But unfortunately, some of these labor market interventions, if there's no jobs, there's no jobs, regardless of all the supports we can provide them. So that speaks to a little bit our, presentation earlier regarding the economy. Still, Ontario in general still has a huge issue around competitiveness, innovation, our lack of investment in R&D. I don't know how, in terms of regions, what's comparatively how we sort of track with the other regions. And that also sort of leads me to go into the other area where, so you look at new Canadians, but then after our youth. And you can see that when I'm contacted on a daily basis in my interaction with university students or university grads, and there's a huge issue I'm finding with those two segments of the labor market, youth, and it's already been touched upon. Lastly, I'll throw it out there is also the environment, and I think we talked about sustainable communities. So I think as we grow and we, be it residential, mixed land use, and I think we really have to sort of really be very vigilant in how we protect our environment, how we look at, if we're looking at job growth, let's look at job growth, green jobs. Let's look at that strategy. I know in Europe there's a big push around green jobs. So hopefully that we can put some focus around that area. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Mayor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I really think to follow up on the jobs, as Councilor Medeiros said, is key. And how do we create in that environment? And I think the one thing that we're really pushing hard in Caledon right now is to bring high speed in. And it isn't just megabytes anymore. We're talking about gigabytes because it's a challenge. And, you know, even in Brampton and Mississauga, there's parts where you go to buy something or purchase something, you can almost have a cigarette for the card to go through, and that's what we live every day in Caledon. So it's a challenge we have all through. So what are we doing? So when we're doing road infrastructure, are we getting the conduit built in a timely manner so that we could pass that fiber through when we have the opportunity to do so? And if we want to bring those green industries or intelligent manufacturing, or it doesn't matter what we do, we need access to the high speed. And I think that is one of the things that we have to start to look differently as a community, is look at what our technologies are. You want to do R&D development, you need the high speed. You want to put in robotic milkers in Caledon on a dairy farm, you need high speed. It's just a challenge. It's everywhere it's needed. If you want to get people off the road, let's get people working at home. Again, they need high speed. And it isn't just downloading Netflix. The challenge is uploading data back and forth to the office. Now, if we could do that, that's one way of allowing you looking at the impact that was discussed earlier of goods movement, what it's costing us moving 1.5 billion, and also in the goods movement, you know, we're generating about close to 200 million a day coming out of Peel, just in to get that everything to move. It's tough because our infrastructure is limited and it takes time to build. So what can we do quickly? Let's get people working more from home. You know, that's live, work, play, is it not? And the challenge too going forward is I heard Councillor Anika talk about, you know, live and work in the same place, have the shops down below, the apartments up above. And that's what we're doing in Mayfield West and the same in Caledon East, if you can see. But you know the biggest challenge we have is our DCs are double dipping. It's making it tough for the builders to build, to make it affordable for people to live. So it's things that we have to think differently how to do it. Also, you're right, Councillor Anika, we have to educate the public. There isn't that appetite. People are fearful living above that. So we have to educate the lifestyle why it needs to go that way. So it isn't just building it and it will come. I think we have, we got to get it past the silo effect. It affects everybody. It doesn't matter if it's, you know, now we have health that's starting to comment on infrastructure. It's planning, it's engineering, it's everything that comes together. We got to emphasize that a lot more as we go forward. It's the same as when we're looking at the LRT. I'm thrilled for Brampton and Mississauga. This is a good news story. But we need to build transit hubs as well. But the biggest challenge is, as the region, if we got parcels of land sitting all over the place, why aren't we turning them into parking spots for kiss and ride, or allow a person to get out so that all of a sudden you get into a bike lanes, you can park your car, get in your bike and move further on in, or be able to get on a bus or meet up with two others to go further to work. But the big thing is there's no infrastructure to pull off. We built a kiss and ride and a bus transit at the bottom end of Bolton. I bet you if you go right there now, you can't find a parking spot. It's full.
Actually, Mayor Thompson, this is good discussion, but I think we're kind of moving into what we want to do in sessions.
So we're ahead of you again.
Again, exactly. I called you bright minds. And, so maybe just keep it a little briefer, and but it's good discussion.
But no, I'm just trying to tie the DC thing back into it, is we have to think differently. Thanks.
Right. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I think we call it park and ride, Mayor Thompson. There might be some kissing going on there too, but it's 3 points I want to make. And Ron Jaros, you responded to Councillor Medeiros with respect to the long-form census. And if you look at all of the presentations today, a lot of what we do is driven from the information and the data that we mine from the census. And when we're, you know, Canadians are not participating in a way that allows us to get relevant information, it makes our job, or your job, more difficult in terms of predicting and planning for the future. So I think that we need to, in our strategic plan, acknowledge that there is a role for advocacy, but it is a message that the federal government needs to hear, not just from Peel, but right across the country. Otherwise, we can do all the planning and put all the energy and resources into doing something that may be not aligned with what's actually happening out or we're not able to align it because we don't have verifiable data to work from. So that's the first point I want to make. The second is, and there's been some conversation around the table in terms of aging in place, and we need to expand our definition, our interpretation of that. Aging in place doesn't mean necessarily that the senior is allowed to stay in that home. We need it, aging in place is staying in the neighborhood. So if they are somebody who is living in a neighborhood today where their bank and their veterinarian and their doctor and you know, schools and whatnot, where the infrastructure is all there, it's familiar to them, where they're able to transition into other housing options in there. So we need to do a lot better job right across the board in Peel in our 3 municipalities, that aging in place means aging in a neighborhood. And it's, you know, when seniors can make that choice on their own to transition to a different type of housing, it's a lot cheaper on the system than providing supports for individuals or agencies to come into their home so they can age in their home. And the last point I want to make is there's an awful lot of conversation happening around mental health issues. We have not mentioned it anywhere in the presentations today, and yet it is an underlying theme in a lot of the things that we deal with, a lot of the programs that we have. Whether it, you know, we know that mental health issues manifest themselves in terms of homelessness, in terms of unemployment or underemployment, health risks. So I think we need to acknowledge that in our strategic plan, and because there is a lot of, otherwise there's a disconnect between what the province is talking about in terms of ramping up and enhancing mental health supports. If we're not mentioning it at the local level in a very visible way, then it looks like we perhaps are not aligned, and yet we know we are. So I would like to see us in the strategic plan put mental health issues front and center, identify them. You know, I'm looking at the slide that I think it's number 41 that Dr. Davila, you know, whether it's alcohol, you know, abuse or the slide, anyways, the slide here. It really just, we know and we need to say it.
Councillor Moore, thanks so much for making that point, because it's one of the major challenges with Peel Regional Police as well, as you know, like just about every domestic dispute or every almost, I forget, I was mind-boggled by the number of calls per day that are just related to that issue. So I think it's on the forefront as well. Councillor Sprovieri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question to staff is in regards to the employment shortfall that we're experiencing to date. I think it was pointed out that we're down about 80,000 jobs that were predicted to have been additional jobs that were predicted, and we have not achieved the projection. I guess my question is, obviously we need to form a strategy to somehow reverse the trend and try to get back on track. And as we heard, probably that's going to be quite a challenging exercise. But in this exercise, I believe we need to look at our neighboring and other municipalities, regions in the province, whether they're experiencing the same trend or whether Peel region is the only one going that route. And if we are the only ones and everyone else seems to be growing according to their projections, then we have to figure out what we're doing wrong here. Maybe our DCs are too high and business is going elsewhere.
Councillor Sprovieri, David would just like to make a comment with respect to that.
Thank you.
What we're experiencing in Peel is not unique to Peel. It's being experienced right across the GTAH area. And from our perspective, the issue is that the methodology that the province is using to project the number of jobs that will come to the community or be developed in the community is flawed based on the way the economy is changing. So what we need to do is get behind some of those assumptions and replace them with more accurate assumptions. However, your point that we still, and the point that other members of council have made, is that employment, sustained, good employment is critical for Peel. So to answer your question, it's not unique to Peel, but I really agree with you that it should be one of the things on the list that we address.
And Mr. Chairman, I just briefly, obviously the province was trying to do their math and was trying to project the number of jobs needed to sustain the number of people that's going to be coming to the region. So then if that is a flaw, then does that mean that we have to plan to have less people come here in some way, or can we control that?
I would suggest that's one of the discussions you should have in the workshops that will help shape the plan.
Thank you. Councillor Ennis.
Thank you, Chair Dale. I guess I'm just spitting off on some of the messaging that others have said. Employment lands are extremely important, and in particular, protecting the employment lands. Now that the province has given us the ability to protect the employment lands beyond 20 years, I think that we really need to take advantage of that, and that sort of plays into infrastructure. And I know we've all been talking about some of the soft services and infrastructure, but I think that the roads are a priority that we need to be focusing on. And where we grow and where we put employment can also help with alleviating some of that infrastructure. Putting employment more northernly towards the top end of Brampton and the south end of Caledon also creates that two-way. So instead of everybody during rush hour heading south, some of those are now moving north, and that can alleviate some of the pressures on our road networks. Also working towards creating better connection through multi-use trail networks amongst the various municipalities, getting people out of their cars and cycling and walking and creating that connectivity is also something that we should be looking at into the future.
Thank you. Councillor Fonseca.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I won't repeat, I echo many of the things that have been already said, but I do want to emphasize around the collaboration, cost sharing, and information sharing piece between different levels of government that has been brought up. I think one of the things that Peel has done extremely well, and I think we need to make sure that it's clear to both the province and the federal government, is that when we've brought together hubs, so community hubs for social services or health services, or also for newcomers, like I sit on Peel Newcomer Strategy Group. These types of hub groups bring together the different levels of government and also different stakeholders where we have the opportunity to talk and discuss about how to best use resources and how to best share and collaborate on the use of those resources, both in the present, and somebody or a number of people have mentioned that our community is changing in all the presentations, that it's changing very quickly over a short period of time, and it will be changing into the future. And I think these types of hubs have been a great benefit to the region of Peel and to all of the residents within Peel. So I think that's something that we want to, through the sessions today, look at what have been the benefits of those hubs, how have they been effective in terms of using funds from different levels of government and also within the region of Peel, but also on all the outcomes that were shown through the different presentations today, whether they be health outcomes, employment outcomes, or integration or of immigrants into Peel. Because I think there's a lot of important data that we can gather from those, and I think we have to stress to the federal government the importance of the long-form census, and that data gathering information is so important in decision-making rather than us making or guessing as a region and for our municipalities. I think, let's see, what else? I just wanted to mention, I think the importance of housing has been mentioned, but the importance of a national housing strategy, I think, is extremely important. When we talk about housing, there's such it's such a continuum of housing, and again, it's difficult. There's a lot of guesswork that's happening. There's new housing that needs to be built, but at the same time, we have a lot of housing in Peel where people are already housed and they want to stay where they are. And in terms of how do we fund that? How do we keep are the buildings that they're in appropriate for their uses, and gathering information. Again, gathering information from them is extremely important. So having a national housing strategy, I think, is an important message to send to the federal government. And to look at housing as a continuum. And again, within complete communities, I think working with the province, when you look at a lot of the communities, now I'm talking about communities that are already built out, but for example, if I walk along the Bloor corridor in Ward 3, Dixie Bloor, right
Councillor
there.
Fonseca, with respect, I think we're getting more into
Okay,
what we
into
wanna
the
do.
topic? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that's fine. I'm just seeing if there's any
You've
other.
made some great comments, though. Thanks.
Oh, one other thing. Stormwater, wastewater, it wasn't mentioned at all in this federal budget, and it's something that we've talked about in terms of a service that is extremely important for the region of Peel, so it's something that hopefully it'll be part of our discussion today.
Thank you. Councillor Raz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will promise to be brief. I think the region has really moved from managing growth over the last 20, 30 years to how are we just going to be able to manage going forward. And even when it comes to seniors, and there was a lot of really interesting data presented, we have to look at how we can work on capacity types of models for services without actually expending money on the critical infrastructure needed. And that's going to have to be, we're going to have to look at those flexible models. So that's going to be a challenge, because if you look at even just the seniors trajectory, it's going to be at some point leveling off a bit, so you can't put large infusions of capital very quickly, and then the need won't be there a few years later. So how can we maintain that flexibility? I think moving to a model where increasing numbers are becoming increasingly reliant on not just one particular service, it's all services that we offer, whether it's social services, garbage, or infrastructure. There's going to be pressure on everything. So, and how are we going to pay for this? Certainly in Brampton and Mississauga, those development dollars are drying up a bit. So my issue would be the main one, in addition to all the other ones mentioned, which is the current tax scheme and revenue model I don't believe are sustainable, and we're going to certainly need to involve other levels of government to explore possible options for that going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Parrish.
I'm just trying to draw a conclusion. When you look back on the slide of heart disease, dementia, cerebrovascular disease, it almost looks like cars breaking down. The fluids are going, the engine is going, the pumps are going, and the computer chips aren't working anymore. I think when you have people living to 80.7 for males and 86 for females, you have to talk to people who specialize in aging, and they may tell you that 1,733 people out of 5,000 dying last year is just because all their parts wore out. So I don't know what we do about those people. I mean, you can't tell an 86-year-old to go out and do more exercise and it'll make their heart work better, because their heart's tired and it's finished. So a lot of these top 4 diseases, and especially dementia, which is very common now, is way more common because our people are living longer. So you just wonder what the organism's life expectancy could be pushed as healthy as you could get it, running like mad, never drinking, never smoking, never doing anything that's fun. And the other thing that concerned me is our new chairman of environment, Mr. Matt Mahoney, pointed out that the federal government budget had absolutely nothing in it on environment, nothing to help the environment or clean up the environment. I was watching TV the other day, and they were talking about a study that just came out that tested kids with, what is it they get?
Vaccinations?
No, I've got Alzheimer's. Autism, I'm sorry. And they said that 15 years ago, it was 1 in 2,000 in Canada. This year, it's 1 in 68. So as we're pumping $1.5 billion worth of products through Peel on trucks that are spewing out pollutants, and as we're making our lives all that much more interesting with all this air pollution and all the environmental stuff we're putting on vegetables to make them grow and all the rest of it, you just wonder if that's what's happening. We're just eventually killing off our population with too much of this stuff, too many trucks, too much pollution. And how the heck do you stop that if the federal government's not doing one darn thing about the environment? So the Government Relations Committee should put that as number one, if it still exists, on their agenda, to go back to the federal government and say, these are our statistics. These are the statistics we're getting from doctors across Canada.
Yeah.
What are we doing about it?
Councillor Paris, we're getting, it's...
Again, I'm off topic.
No, we're just getting into solutions, which we want to do.
I have no solution. If I had a solution, I'd be a rich person.
Well, we're getting into discussion for solutions. Okay, there's 3 more speakers, and then I'm going to end it there. It's Councillor Shaughnessy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've been talking about housing, but we haven't been talking about how we can do it better. So I'm talking about green technology, simple technology that was used in the 60s that somehow it went away. Simple things like when we're building developments, we have all these stormwater ponds to handle the water. We talked a couple of weeks ago about the water coming off the roofs and it's going into the sewers and creating problems. A simple solution back, I know we're not supposed to talk about solutions, but was cisterns. We used to have cisterns on homes and we recycled water, and I think we've all forgotten about how precious water is. And there are simple ways that we could solve that problem if we implemented some of those ideas from the past, actually. The other big thing that I find is conservation. We all talk about conservation of land, conservation of water, but we also should be talking about conservation of existing buildings. And that is the biggest movement in architecture right now, is the repurposing of existing buildings. And instead of blowing it up and starting all over, actually taking some of our old development and revitalizing it. So the 2 things is I'd love to hear more about conservation of existing and how we can do it better, and green technology so we can take pride in our community and make it better for the future.
Good stuff. Thanks. Councillor Palashi.
Thank you. I've heard a lot of great ideas out there. I just kind of wondered about what about safety being, I think, a major importance on we talk about livable, workable communities, building, great housing, but if we're not keeping those communities safe, then who's going to live in those communities? We're trying to bring businesses to the region, and if we can't keep those businesses out of harm's way, then are they really going to be here? With our children, sending them to school, and the possibility of them being bullied or something stolen from them, I guess it goes against what we really want to do, and as a region. So I think safety is a top priority, and goes along with everything that's kind of been said around the table here today. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you. I guess as we're providing a laundry list, and then I would be remiss if I did not mention arts and culture. Specifically for being on PAMA. And I will say, when we talk about livable communities, one of the special things that Peel Region has is its diversity. It's an amazing, we're blessed with these different cultures, and even some of our clients groups, when we talk about New Canadians, when we talk about the LGBT community, when we talk about people with disabilities. I think through arts and culture, I think we can, hopefully we still as a region, we can still support those activities in these groups. So I just like to throw their arts and culture.
Okay, thank you. David, I'm going to go back to you to...
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you, what we have to do is formally recess the council to move into the workshops. And before you do that, Mr. Chairman, I'll just explain what's going to happen. There are facilitators in each workshop. You'll notice in front of you that we have name cards that are colored. And the purpose of those colored name tags are really to... It's not that we don't know your names, it's to identify which group you're going to go to. And the host in your group will lead you through the 4 sessions. So all of the ideas that you've put forward will be grouped into four areas: the environment, health, and 2 others which I forget because this is such an exciting opportunity. The ideas will be grouped into the four different workshops. We're going to move you very quickly through the workshops. I was going to say it's going to be like speed dating, but I've never done speed dating, so I can't say. It'll be like, reminds me when I was a boy in a Catholic school, it'll be like going to confession. You have to go in there, say everything you know as quickly as you can and get out. So there's 30 minutes per.
You spent 30 minutes in confession? All right.
Yeah.
And you ended up politics.
And a lifetime paying for it.
I'd like to know what the penance was.
I'm here. 30 minutes per session. We're going to have one right before lunch, then a break for lunch, and then your facilitators will move you to each one. And then we'll come back here after you've gone through all 4 of them. And the idea is really just to expand upon these ideas that you've put forward. So the purple group, those of you who have purple signs will, your group host is Radana Makovsky, and Radana will take you to the room as soon as we recess. The second group is the blue group, and that's Chine Mikado. Chine will follow Chine to the blue group. The pink group, Mark Critch is your host, and the green group is Kim Batta is going to host. So I'll leave it to you to formally recess council, and we'll ask council members to follow their hosts.
We're in recess, full recess.
They wrote the name down. Blue. I thought it was purple.
Just so that.
Yeah. That's for you. Oh, it's good.